I'm going to share something with you today that most people are still unable to see. But from my vantage point, working with ultra successful female entrepreneurs, it is crystal clear. We are literally witnessing the beginning of the greatest business revolution in human history. One that will have ripple effects that transforms how we experience our day to day lives, our education, our community, and connections. And it's being led by women who have transcended individual achievement and are now being called to create a planetary legacy. So today's episode is not just about giving you wishful thinking and hope. This is prophecy. And I'm going to show you exactly why. My name is Makhosi, and I work exclusively with 8-figure plus female entrepreneurs who have achieved everything that they thought that they wanted and still end up feeling spiritually empty. What I have discovered over the years of in-depth work in this space is that this emptiness isn't a problem. It's really an activation of a calling. It's their soul recognizing that individual success without collective service will never be enough. And these women, my clients, are becoming the pioneers of a revolution that will literally save our world. And it all starts with individual awakening. So, by the end of this episode, you're going to understand why this revolution is really inevitable and why ultra successful women are the perfect catalysts. But more importantly, how to recognize if you are also being called to lead it. So let's start by digging into some of the signs, because once you start to see them, you really can't unsee them. One of the most critical pieces of evidence that we have is that we see more women every single year are reaching 7, 8, 9-figure success than ever in history. And this is crucial because in order to create a certain type of transformation, it requires being well resourced. We also see this growing discontent or this growing lack of fulfillment and spiritual emptiness despite having material achievement. My clients are consistently asking, is this all there is? There's something to be said for sitting and looking at all of the incredible accomplishments that you have achieved in your life, and yet knowing that there is still more, that there is a depth you haven't tapped into yet. We also see that more and more people are awakening to purpose beyond their own personal accumulation. I was reading an article about Gen Z, and they were investigating the priorities that were influencing how they voted in the last election. And what was fascinating was that most of them had fulfilling career as their number one or number two most important priority. And that was even over the money. So we're starting to recognize that the money is just meant to be a byproduct, that there is something more that the soul is craving. And we're starting to see that more leaders are recognizing that your individual success feels hollow unless it's applied to planetary service. So I have had multiple clients who have told me I have this experience of having everything that I thought I wanted, but I wake up every day feeling like I'm wasting my potential, like I'm wasting my life. Just chasing bigger and bigger goals by itself isn't really feeding me. And they're longing for that passion, that sense of inspiration that's catalyzing their action versus just chasing the endless hamster wheel of goals. We also see that right now, female wealth accumulation is hitting historical highs. We are seeing that women are controlling an increasing percentage of the global investment decisions. And we are also seeing how those decisions are impacting the environmental, social, and global considerations that matter most to women. We're also seeing across the board a growing demand for purpose-driven business models. And this is going down even to the level of employee, right? We are seeing that more people want to be doing something that matters, that they don't want to just be robots contributing to the cog, right? Just to exist. And we're also seeing that resources that are necessary for planetary healing are finally moving into the right hands. The numbers, if we look at them, are absolutely staggering. Women now control or influence 83% of consumer spending. And we are projected to control $30 trillion in wealth by 2030. So, for the first time in history, the resources that are needed for systemic change are in the hands of people who actually want to use them for good, who want to see the world look different. But we also have to talk about the timing of all of this because there's an incredible synchronicity that is playing out. Number one, the climate crisis is creating an undeniable urgency for systemic change. We cannot continue to grow infinitely while extracting finite resources. So there is this very obvious need for us to come up with different ways of living that are sustainable. We also see, number two, that traditional capitalism is showing very clear signs of failure. I don't think that there's a single system that you can look at least in the West, where we can say, yes, humans are thriving because of this. And the reason for that is it's built on extraction. It is built on infinite greed rather than finding ways to grow that are deeper than just more profit. We're also seeing that technology is enabling global collaboration and an impact, right? We are able to gain access to brand new insights, to human beings with different perspectives. And this is giving us really unfair advantage when we lean into it. We also see that our generational values are starting to shift and that more people are demanding conscious enterprise. They are demanding that the places and the people with whom they spend their money are aligned on their values. This doesn't mean that there's an expectation that, every single value needs to align, but people are becoming more aware about where they spend their money and with whom, and they want that to reflect how they see themselves. And they want to see themselves as someone who is aware, who is not just contributing to so many of the societal ills that we're experiencing. And in this exact moment, we are seeing this convergence of crises across the world happening, and also capability. We are seeing that there is a group of people who are highly capable and who carry unique insight. And right now, the crisis is creating this portal or this gateway for change to happen. I'll be very frank with you. Human beings suck at change. We resist it with every fiber of our being until we are in a position where change is the only solution that we have left. Now, it doesn't have to be that way, but it is kind of like our animalistic nature. It's a funny paradox of being human because the one thing that is guaranteed about this world is that it is changing. It will always be changing moment to moment. But humans, we struggle with change. We struggle with embracing that and surrendering to change. So the truth is we have, maybe a 10-year window to transform how business operates before climate change and the environment makes it irrelevant. And so for the first time, we have the right leaders with the right resources at exactly the right moment. And also, side note, we have leaders who are not equipped, who are failing epically. So when you have that beautiful convergence, it creates opportunity. We're also seeing that there is a movement for female-dominant corporations to expand. More and more evidence is coming out about what happens when you put money, resources, connections, talent in the hands of feminine leadership. And it's coming out more and more that women have the emotional intelligence and insight to expand in ways that are more stable, that are more sustainable, and also end up creating more abundance than the traditional pathways. So we see that women are able to pioneer more regenerative business models, that when we make investments in ourselves and in our companies, that we think further than the immediate, win that quarter. That we think about how it affects our family and our team's families. We think about the ripple effect of the impact on our industry. We also deeply care about, how it affects our communities. And it's that consciousness that will create change. More and more, we're seeing that conscious capitalism initiatives are being led by awakened female entrepreneurs. So, women who are beginning to be connected to something deeper, to, I will call it, spirit, right? And you may even notice that your own clients are naturally evolving towards a bigger picture, towards a bigger purpose and planetary service. And so this is a pattern that I see that's emerging in every industry and in every transformation. So this is what I'm seeing that other people are missing. Every client of mine who achieves true freedom from their own golden cage naturally starts asking how they can serve something bigger, how what they're doing is going to impact not just their children, but their children's children's children, and how it will shift the world that they leave behind. So this isn't something that I focus on just teaching. It's actually something that emerges when you start to remove the blocks to your authentic expression. This is something that naturally arises, and I believe is our natural state when we are able to remove the limitations that keep us disconnected, keep us hyperfixated on chasing solely material things for material's sake. And ultimately, when we're connected on an essence level, we are activated into what we might call our destiny, right? Our dharma, our calling. So, why women? Why now? And why specifically ultra successful women? So let's break down the pioneer profile that is emerging. The first is a post-achievement consciousness. I started to notice this back in 19, that those who have mastered individual success discover its limitations, that for the vast majority of people, this is why I don't work with 99% of people, is that they are still chasing their own individual success. And this is not to demonize that. In fact, it's a very important step on your evolution journey. However, once you have achieved success again and again and again, and discovered that it doesn't fill the emptiness that comes when you achieve without meaning, without purpose, that is a very different experience. And those who are meant to pioneer a new way need to do the consciousness work that's necessary in order to be able to recognize what is truly fulfilling. Because most of us are living a life where we are constantly focused on material accumulation, where we're constantly focused on what gives us status, or what other people think of us, or what our audience wants from us, or what our children or our parents think we should be, right? And so it's getting to this stage that you are now at a point where you're no longer impressed by material accumulation, when you know deep within your being that pretty much anything that you want, you can get, because you have developed that tenacity and resilience within yourself to figure shit out. The second characteristic that I find is access to resource. All right. Systemic change, whether you want to admit it or not, requires wealth. It requires resource. It requires being able to make investments in building. Destroying is easy, but having access to resources, wealth that is financial, time wealth, connections and community wealth, creativity wealth, right? All of these things are necessary to create change. And it's at this point that ultra successful women are able to have say and a standing that influences their networks and their industries. And they're also able to make big decisions. They also have access to other high net worth individuals and resources, because holding on to the idea that any one person is going to be able to do it alone is the definition of insanity. We need other people. And it's also at this point when you're able to afford to think long term instead of being survival focused on just getting through today. You can actually start to think about, what does next year look like? What does 5 years look like? What does 10 years look like? And being able to hold a long-term vision that isn't just based on month to month, quarter to quarter, is what's necessary to pioneer change. The third characteristics is a level of spiritual authority. And so in order to create this systemic change, you need to have done deep inner work and be able to embody your authentic power. It's important to also be able to understand consciousness principles and energy dynamics, how energy moves, how it shows up, but also, I would also say that this is power dynamics as well. And with this spiritual authority that has to be authentic, it has to come from having done shadow work. You're able to lead from spiritual authority rather than ego-driven power. And it's through this evolution of authority that you can then begin to model integration of success and soul fulfillment. I talk about integration. Sometimes I feel like I'm just like beating a dead horse, but the future is not about extremes. It is about how do we create and bridge both success and soul. Right? How do we live purposefully now, and also create real material abundance? The fourth characteristics is an orientation to legacy. So you're beginning to think in terms of generations, not quarters. And you have a concern about the world that you're leaving for your children and your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren. Indigenous wisdom tells us that, any change that we make affects 7 generations in the future and 7 generations back. And that's not like a hard and fast rule, but I think that it's an important way to start thinking about the world. Part of why society is so screwed up is because we have had a very get rich quick scheme mindset around how we create wealth in the world. So you need to be in a position where you are valuing the impact over immediate profit. This does not mean that you don't care about making money, but it does mean that you are able to see how betraying your core values jeopardizes the sustainability of what you are building and what it stands for. And so you need to be able and willing to sacrifice short-term surface level gains in order to create long-term good and growth. And last but not least, the fifth characteristic is really all about collaboration mastery. You need to understand that planetary healing requires collaboration and collective action. That when you are in your true feminine leadership, I'm going to have to do a whole episode probably on what feminine actually is, because it's not this passive, doormat, submissive BS that the patriarchy has been telling you is what feminine is. That ain't it at all. But the true feminine does value collaboration over competition. It looks like you being able to build networks and movements, not just individual empires. Just a quick note here. One way that you can determine your own ability to be in this true feminine style of leadership is to pay attention to your ability to be in relationships with other women. Right now, we have had a very concerted effort to keep women disconnected from one another. And so your ability to recognize the importance of this collaborative approach means that you recognize that we are going to need to heal together or that we don't heal. So, this is not to be extremist. Your individual healing matters as well, but that we start to recognize that we are communal beings. All right, so let me share what I see coming. This is not just based on speculation, but in the patterns of consciousness that I'm witnessing accelerate in real time. This is also based on data as well as shamanic sight, my own gifting. These have also been talked about in many different spiritual systems, indigenous prophecies, etc. But I want to give you my take on this from the lens of spiritual business and specifically for women. All right, right now we are in phase 1. I will call this the awakening, and this is really going to be happening from 2025 to 2027. Right now we're in a time where more and more ultra successful women are recognizing that they are being called, that there is something deeper emerging and alignment is moving to their top priority. And so the shift is showing up in the questioning process. It's shifting from how do I get more clients, more money, more houses, etc., to how do I serve more? How do I express more? How do I catalyze more? How do I be more? And we're starting to see in this period the formation of conscious business collectives and alliances. We're also going to be seeing an increasing investment in regenerative and healing focused enterprises, and more people are withdrawing their time, energy, dollars from businesses and spaces that are not contributing to a better collective. And so I want to ask you to reflect on, what is this looking like for you right now? Where are you starting to notice misalignment? In one of the upcoming episodes, I'll share more deeply about how I do an energy audit. And one of the things that has become really clear is how many women have become successful solely by focusing on, getting good enough at lots of things, but not spending near enough time in their genius. And your calling requires you to be in your genius and to surrender things that are not in your genius, and being able to take your genius and then translate that into what is desirable, what is necessary, what is top of mind for people. Because just keeping your genius to yourself doesn't matter. We actually need architecture. We need structure to bring out your spirit into service. In phase 2, we're going to see the implementation. So this is from 2028 to about 2030. We will start to see large scale business model transformations moving towards regenerative systems. We are going to see more self-sustaining models that can weather various storms, and there's going to be a shift from this constant growth mindset to a deeper growth mindset, where we are able to shift our perspective around what growth looks like, and that it can mean a deepening, that it can mean a more connectedness, that it can mean more expression, more wholeness, and how that manifests in business, right? We're going to start seeing more markers that demonstrate how people are feeling in their roles or when they purchase from a company, right? So we're going to start to see conscious capitalism becoming the mainstream investment strategy, that people are going to be investing not just based off of what's doing well on the stock market, but what is contributing to the higher good, right? We'll also see industry-wide shifts towards more planetary healing priorities. One of the things that I love about this is that it sounds really nice, but it's very tangible and it's also very profitable. I have a client that I'm working with in the airline industry, and we're talking about how to bring through this human first approach in corporate spaces in the airline industry. And once you start to translate how much money is lost, how much money is spent on activities trying to negate the negative impacts of soulless work, right? And you actually take a human first approach, it ends up being more profitable and it ends up being more sustainable in the long run. We'll also see traditional businesses start to adapt or becoming irrelevant. We are already starting to see this, but I think that we're going to see some huge collapses of businesses that absolutely refuse to become more aware of the impact that they're making. And so that's when we'll really start to see this tipping point where conscious business becomes the norm, right? So this means that you have at this moment an opportunity to kind of get ahead of the game and establish yourself for success, to be the pioneer and the leader in conscious business. Because I can tell you right now already, people are looking sideways at companies who are not standing on anything, who are just chasing dollars, right? So this is already starting, but this is really where we're going to see that take off. And in phase 3, this is going to be like the revolution, which seems far away, but just keep in mind the pandemonium was over 5 years ago. Okay, so what I'm talking about is just a little over 5 years from now. This is when we will see a massive revolution. And we will see that regenerative business models and leaders who are connected to their calling are going to be dominating major industries. That we are going to see planetary healing, we're going to see consciousness integrated into all business decisions. And this is going to become more pronounced because right now we are seeing the effects of what happens when you don't bring consciousness to your decisions and you are just making decisions based off of money. Money is an excellent servant, but it is not meant to be your master. It's meant to be a tool, a support. It's supposed to help you. It's supposed to be a byproduct, right? But it is not supposed to be the thing that you sacrifice truth, wholeness, humanity for. We'll also see the global economic system moving towards serving life instead of destroying it. So we are in a period where we are seeing a high amount of destruction of life, both human and environmental. But we're moving into, after this period, we are moving into a reprioritizing, a rethinking of how we are approaching and doing business. We'll also see that success will be measured by regenerative impact alongside profit. So it doesn't mean that we don't care about profit. It doesn't mean that we don't care about expansion, but it does mean that we also include impact and that the way that we approach growth monetarily changes. And so this will be the period when the new paradigm is fully established. And ultimately, this is the season for women. I'm going to say middle age, but it's it's not just the middle age. It's, women from the age of 30 to 60, in that kind of middle range, who are the ones who are, through their own self-mastery, through their own alignment, setting a new standard and proclaiming a new vision for their own lives, for their communities, for their industries, and out until we get to the collective or the planet. So this is what's going to become possible when we finally see this revolution start to hit critical mass. We'll start to see in the business space that business starts to be used as a force for healing instead of extraction. That wealth creation serves the planetary's restoration instead of destruction. That we see competition evolving into more collaboration for the collective good. And that innovation is going to be focused on regeneration rather than endless consumption. At the level of consciousness, we're going to see this evolution where we are measuring success and defining success in a way that includes our depth of impact, our depth of service in the world. That leadership is going to be based on emotional intelligence and spiritual authority and embodiment rather than the illusion of egoic power. This idea that the more violent you can be, the more brash you can be, the more caveman like you can be, that's not real power. That's actually just an expression of insecurity. And that decision making will start to consider 7 generations into the future. I think about my great grandparents who were part of the silent generation, and so much of that generation, they experienced the Great Depression here in the US, and that catalyzed in them a desire to see something different for their children, but they kind of stopped there. They just stopped there. They weren't necessarily thinking 7 generations down the road. And I wonder, what would the world look like if we were considering, okay, if I remove these trees, what effect does that have 7 generations from now? And the most exciting part of this evolution, especially in the self-help, spiritual, transformational spaces, is that we're going to start to see individual fulfillment be a catalyst through collective contribution. That we are going to find fulfillment not solely in things, but in how we show up and how we create change. And both of these, both the business transformation and the evolution of consciousness that we're seeing, will both be contributing to planetary healing. So we're going to start to see climate solutions integrated into all business models. The one that I'm most excited for is AI. We need to be having conversations around and actually innovating and prioritizing how we are going to solve the energy issue with AI, right? We need to be bringing regenerative practices to heal damaged ecosystems and the way that we consume, the way that we use items, the way that we even live. We'll also start to see conscious wealth starting to flow towards restoration projects, because it's not enough to just stop doing extractive shit. It's also important for us to restore and to take responsibility for the impact that we have contributed, but also our ancestors. And I'll probably also be getting into that piece around ancestral responsibility, because I see that that's something that a lot of people really struggle with, wanting to take ownership of what our ancestors did. I could go on and on about that, but we're also going to see global collaboration starting to replace destructive competition, which really ultimately just results in a zero-sum game where it's just a race to the bottom. It's who is going to become the worst, the person or group of people or entity first. We don't want to be participating in that. So the question really becomes, are you ready to step into your role in this prophecy? I want you to take a moment and really reflect. Have you experienced an emptiness despite achieving massive success? Have you experienced a consistent high that lasts for a day, 2 days, a week, but then you just have to have another bigger, better goal, that it's never feels like enough? Do you know that you are being called to something greater than individual achievement? Do you have resources that just feel like a responsibility rather than a privilege? And does the state of the world feel personally urgent to you? This calling requires preparation and consciousness development. Not everyone is ready for this level of responsibility. And not everyone is ready for the inner work that's necessary to lead from a place of authentic power. And most aren't even seeing how business transformation is required to become a healing vehicle in the world. So we find ourselves at a crossroads. This revolution will happen with or without you. And not choosing to participate in the revolution ultimately means living with the regret of having resource and consciousness, but choosing to stay small. And it comes with not experiencing the fulfillment that can come from aligning your success with your soul purpose. And this choice really boils down to your role in determining the speed and success of this transformation, of whether you will participate in it or not. So it's important that you understand that this planetary healing revolution that's happening through conscious business isn't coming someday, one day. It's already here. Ultra successful women are the chosen leaders of this transformation. I'm seeing it accelerate in my work every single day. I guide it through the consciousness development of transcendent titans. And I develop the women who will literally heal our world through empire building that serves life instead of destroying it. This is why I do the work I do. I'm not just helping women escape the golden cage of success. I'm developing the planetary healing leaders our world desperately needs. Every woman that I guide into her authentic power becomes a catalyst for this revolution. So if you're feeling called to step into your role in this prophecy, if you recognize yourself as one of these awakened leaders, then we need to talk, because the planet needs you to stop playing small with your purpose. Be sure to see the description for the application process and stay tuned for more on this revolution and how you fit into the bigger picture.